And first of all, of course, I acknowledge the respected elders of the Yolngu people, particularly the Gumatj, who greet us here on their land, the Gulkulu. It's a beautiful sight, and I acknowledge too the clan leaders right across the Yolngu who have gathered here, as well as clan leaders from throughout our great nation who gather here. The strength of the Yolngu is without question. It's been my honour and privilege to have worked in the Parliament of the Northern Territory for 12 years now, to understand their ways as best I can, coming from my world of Darwin, having been born and raised among the saltwater people of the top end. I acknowledge here the presence of my colleague Lynn Walker, my member for Nhulunbuy, of course my colleague in the Federal Parliament, Warren Snowden, fondly known as Wazza, and of course our Federal Minister, Jenny Macklin, who I've had the pleasure of working with in the past when the Labor Party here was in government. Thank you for the many partnerships that you delivered to assist the lives of our Indigenous Territorians. And Senator Nigel Scullion, I acknowledge you as well. I am deeply humbled and honoured to be asked to speak today. It is a very important theme. When you look at the theme of partnership, you look at the theme of reconciliation, you look at the theme of future prosperity. What strikes me, having been born and raised and living in the Territory for most of my life, is this view that some people hold that Indigenous Territorians and indeed Indigenous Australians are this tight homogenous group and that is it. But we know that they are diverse. They have diverse aspirations, ambitions, living conditions, experiences in life, but what binds them is the strength of their culture and the way their culture is inextricably linked to their land and the sea. But they are diverse, so simplistic views on what is there in terms of partnerships or in terms of reconciliation or in terms of future prosperity don't work. It is complex and it is something that many of us devote pretty well all of our life to. And I hope we devote our life to it on the journey of learning, because none of us know the one answer, the one thread that will ensure the prosperity and the well-being that we all hope exist across people, within their family groups and within their communities. I was the Treasurer of the Northern Territory for 5 years. I was a Minister in the Territory Government for 8 years. I've been in Parliament for 12 years. I have seen people come and people go through the lands that I call home here in the Territory. And they all come with a view, a very firm view, of what they think works. And they go with that view somewhat shaken, because the people standing strong, standing here, standing and watching another visitor come and go, spend the time with incredible patience and beautiful openness to explain that maybe they have a view, the people who live here have a view, and that should be a part of what we all search for in terms of improving the well-being of people. It is fundamental. And I look at the well-being, and of course, listening to Jawa this morning, listening to the speeches, fundamental to that is education. Fundamental to that is caring for our children. And fundamental to that is the respect for the two ways of learning, the ability to walk in two worlds. And my own government thought that we could rush into literacy and numeracy and really push and force an emphasis on that without the respect to bilingual, and we got that wrong. What I have learnt most through my years of listening and travelling and learning, and that journey is only partway through my learning journey, is that people have to be listened to in terms of their views and what works for them. And of course, the bilingual strength, what I've learnt through this region particularly, I think is a shining example of success, of what genuinely works. I've seen too many people, too many times, point to what doesn't work. We've all got that. In any sector of our society, in any community, in any city, anywhere in Australia or in the world, there are things we can point to that don't work. But can we start to celebrate our successes, please? Can we start to point to, and I cannot count the number of times even in a week that I come across because of the opportunity in my job, genuine success stories. Success stories like the Homeland Schools, which I've seen operating, and I've seen the infrastructure delivered out there in the last decade so that the children are learning in reasonable conditions. In fact, some very good conditions in some beautiful schools with some very committed people on their country, in their homelands. And of course, like any diverse community, any diverse society, you want choice and you want options, particularly for your children. For the children who want to learn at home, for the children who want to learn in at Yirrkala, for the children who want to learn at Nhulunbuy, or the children who go into Darwin or interstate, they are choices. But as you heard this morning, let us work to ensure we've got a strength of education in our homelands, the respect for the bilingual that is taught there. And I've seen it, and I am absolutely a true believer in the success of what the Yolngu people have been delivering here through bilingual. And in health, we've got such a challenge ahead of us. We've been trying to work together, and it is through partnerships. I think health is a massive example of how partnership can deliver outcome. Yesterday I was on Groote Island. I saw the Makata Joseph Disease Foundation and the work they're doing there in that facility for people who suffer MJD, and of course we've got a large community here, in and out, and we've got a need for more facilities. We don't have a facility here in Nhulunbuy to support people suffering from MJD. So we're on a journey, but I saw the successes of that journey on Groote yesterday and the great work that's being done through a foundation, working in collaboration with the federal government with funding there and in collaboration with the local shire. Tiers of government and philanthropics working together to literally care for people with the most fundamental care needs. They are high support disability needs clients. It works when we're in partnership and we work together and we put the competition aside. There are real, living, successful examples of that here, and particularly in this vibrant northeast Arnhem Land region. When you look at housing, a decade ago, my government, the first time we were in government as a party in the Territory, we were arguing about the need for a massive expenditure and investment in remote housing across the Northern Territory. Remember our first Minister for Housing, Minister Jack Arquette, the first Indigenous minister in our nation, took that argument to Canberra. And we were able to strike agreements with the Commonwealth Government for in excess of $1 billion for a housing program. We've built more than 700 houses and refurbs. There is a real change happening out there, and thanks, of course, to the partnerships through Napari with Minister Macklin, that program is ongoing. That is a decade-long program. That's not a 1 year in and out, as too many programs are in remote regions. That's not a 2 year and trying to scrap for a 3 year agreement. That's a decade that will affect real change to the living conditions for the shelter for people. And it's a start. In terms of bipartisanship, I genuinely hope and believe and dream that that will not finish at the end of the 10 years, that we will continue the build and the refurb of the shelters for the people living in our remote regions of the Northern Territory. Because most fundamental to life is shelter. With good shelter, our children can grow up in an environment of well-being. We've got other things and other challenges too, and I think the learning of how you do it elsewhere will help us, particularly in roads. 23% of the Territory's road network is sealed, just 23%. So for the people living out in the regions, and particularly the remote communities, many across the top end are trapped, cannot get out by road for at least half the year due to the wet season rains. That is trapping people in a situation where they can't travel to get to services properly because of the cost of flights. It's a real and genuine and live transport issue that needs to be attended to, but can only be attended to through partnership. It's not just one tier of government, It's all the tiers of government, and I believe also working with corporate Australia, because their trucks run on our roads, that we can build and seal and give people access to services, affordable access to services. And I became Transport Minister pretty early in my time in Cabinet. And what got me was that you couldn't get on public transport outside of Darwin and Alice Springs. That we only funded buses in Darwin and Alice Springs. We now have public transport linking remote towns to their service hubs of Alice Springs, Katherine. It took a whole 18 months of arguments to get a bus to link Nullarbor to Yirrkala. But we're getting there. My point is we are getting there through persistence and partnerships, and life is changing for people, because if you can get on a bus, it's a lot cheaper than spending a few $100s in a taxi, and you've got more money for your children. It's a journey. I've spent my life witnessing that journey. I'll spend the rest of my life participating and witnessing that journey. I know there are a lot of people out here who commit their lives to that journey. It's so crucial because we have so much opportunity. When I hear about the Lawrie and the ecotourism and the success of the homelands bringing people to the most magnificent country and that beautiful Indigenous tourism experience, they're shining examples of what can be done. And we can learn from those examples. And I keep saying to people, can we stop reinventing the wheel? There are so many success stories by Indigenous Australians, clan leaders right around our nation, and it's through events like Garma where you share those stories that hopefully we can get a faster track sometimes to those successes. But there's no problem sometimes with not rushing. And I think that's what I learnt the most when I was partly raised by stolen generation families in Darwin. They taught me a different pace of life and a different appreciation for time. Spend our time to care for each other, to listen, to learn, and to get it right, but spend our time to celebrate the success as well, please. Can we stop putting each other down? That's reconciliation, surely. The coming together and the embracing each other. My mother was on Reconciliation Australia NT decades ago. I've been on the reconciliation journey as a child for decades. And I'm so proud to see that Recognise exists and that we are pursuing the inclusion of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the constitution of our great nation. Hallelujah. But everyone here needs to be a messenger for that. We need to spend the next 2 years telling our friends and our neighbours what it is we're trying to achieve and why we're trying to achieve it and why it's a really good thing, not a scary thing, because we know Australians tend to vote a no on referendums rather than a yes. Let's make it a yes when we get to that all-important referendum, but every single person here can participate in that and can help us on that journey. So it's another success that we celebrate. And finally, I want to say that education we all get and we all love and we all embrace and we all want to invest in, and health is crucial and the partnerships are dynamic and strong. But that link to jobs is where it gets a little bit soft and tricky. And I say that being a former Minister of Training and Employment. What I've seen work is that expenditure in mentors, understanding that people don't come from an easy living situation all the time, understand that sometimes you're up against it, understand that you've got cultural obligations, and in putting mentor programs in place, and I'd really call on the corporates to do that, to strengthen their mentor programs. It's worth it. You get such a valuable, such a loyal, and such a strong workforce with just a little bit more effort. So maybe that's just one of the partnerships that a few of us can focus on into the future. The partnership between the corporate and the public sector and the leadership of each community to get that link of training and jobs through strengthening mentors. Thank you for the opportunity to come here and speak today. I'm going to be on this journey for the rest of my life, and I am strengthened every day. I sit down and listen to our strong cultural leaders right across our territory. Thank you. And of course, it's my pleasure now to introduce the Federal Minister, Jenny Macklin, who's come all the way during a federal election campaign to be with us at Garma. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you very, very much, Delia. And can I join with everybody here today in acknowledging the Yolngu people, the traditional owners, the way in which we've been welcomed this morning, welcomed in a way that makes us think too about the importance of the generations that have gone before all of us that are able to come here today and enjoy this extraordinary festival. So thank you so much for the welcome and for having us here. I do want to also especially congratulate all of those who've been involved in putting this extraordinary festival together. The Garma Festival is an extraordinary way in which people from so many different walks of life can come together and gain a better understanding of each other. And I do want to ask you all to put your hands together for all the people who've done this amazing amount of work. Well done. To my parliamentary colleagues, Delia went through, but my ministerial colleague, Warren Snowden, who of course is also the member for Lingiari. Thank you, Warren, for joining us here today. The opposition spokesperson, Senator Scullion. Rachel Seward is here too. Rachel, great to see you here. And both Delia and Lynn, of course, from the Territory Parliament. It's terrific to see so many representatives here. I am really pleased to have the opportunity to come and talk with you today about what we have achieved together. And of course, more importantly, I want to talk to you about what is to come. All eyes on the future. As Jawa so strongly put to us in his remarks this morning, all eyes on the future. I do believe that this is a very, very exciting time to be part of the policy making for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. It is an extraordinary time for our nation as a whole. We want to build on the progress that we have made to close the gap with sustained and strategic and coordinated effort for change, and also to continue to build the strong relationships that are so critical to all of us so that we can work together, black and white, business, community, governments and individuals, all of us together, partners for change. As we continue to address what are still very significant challenges ahead, to realise the promise of the gains that we have made so far, as Delia mentioned, to acknowledge the significant importance of building all of these homes so that children do have a safe place to sleep at night, so that they are well rested and can get up and go to school the next day, so that we support Aboriginal people and communities to realise their expectation, once again so forcefully said by Jawa this morning, the expectation of Aboriginal people that welfare should not be a way of life, and that the ownership of land can mean real economic development that helps to drive the creation of Indigenous business and of course of local jobs. And we're seeing the reality of that right here. This is our future, all of our future, and it's the promise that we all share together. I've always been very clear that governments cannot and of course should not build this future alone. Indigenous people have to be in the driver's seat for change. Otherwise, it will not work. And of course, if it is going to work, we do need the strong relationships that have already been talked about today. We do need mutual respect, that mutual respect that will create the trust that's necessary between peoples and governments. And this isn't always easy to find. There have been a lot of great wrongs in the past, a lot of very great wrongs. And that's why, of course, the national apology was so important, why we knew we had to say the word that Aboriginal people had waited so long to hear. They wanted to hear that we are sorry, and of course it was said. The apology was never going to be the end of the journey, rather a new beginning to enable the trust that's needed to be built. We have built on that new beginning with our work to change the Constitution, to recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of this great nation. One of the things we'll all enjoy together this afternoon is we'll make what will be a short part of the very long and epic journey that started down in Melbourne. Many of us were in Melbourne when the journey started, this great journey to recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And of course, there's been thousands of people right across Australia that have participated in this journey and will be able to see it come to an end here this afternoon. All about building that momentum for a successful referendum, and we've been very pleased to financially support Reconciliation Australia and the Recognise campaign to make sure we get the message out to as many people as possible. 5 years ago, when the Prime Minister made the national apology, he made it clear that we needed to also set very clear targets if we were to set ourselves on this path to close the gap, to create a project between governments, Indigenous people, business and the wider community. And of course, many of these targets are very ambitious. But 5 years on, through a consistent, properly funded framework and with sustained effort, and I really want to emphasise the importance of this in Aboriginal affairs. This is so important. Sustained effort, proper funding, making sure there's a coherent framework, all of that has been critical to the successes that we've had. This year, we will meet our first target to make sure that little children, 4-year-olds in remote Indigenous communities across the country will have access to an early childhood place. Never been done before, but this year will be delivered so that children get that early start that they need. And to continue that progress, we've also set ourselves the target to make sure that we get 90% of those children attending preschool or kinder on a regular basis, so they get the advantage of those wonderful programs before the year that they start full-time school. All of us know just how critical it is to have little children participating in early learning if they're to get the best out of their schooling to come. We are also making great progress on the targets we set ourselves to halve the gap on Year 12 retention, and also, of course, that critical gap to halve the gap in infant mortality rates. We're making great progress and we do expect to meet those targets. Of course, we are acutely conscious of how much more there is to be done. We have committed another $700 million to renew our national partnership agreement on Indigenous health, and I want to acknowledge the work that Warren Snowden has done to make sure that in these difficult budgetary times we were able to secure the money that's needed so that we have the people on the ground to deliver the health services that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people need. There's already been quite an emphasis on education here this morning, and one of the areas that of course our government is incredibly proud of is the development of the Better Schools plan that will see children, and particularly Indigenous children, receiving extra support right around the country. And I just want to mention, given the emphasis on homeland schooling, one of the other things that Warren's successfully secured and the contracts have been signed is to see the boarding facility started at Gatalala. So congratulations to all of you. Of course, it doesn't stop at school. We know how critical it is wherever you are in Australia to get the opportunity to go on to further education, to get a TAFE or university qualification. And of course, at the moment, the numbers tell the story about why we need to set ourselves a new target. So we will develop a Closing the Gap target aimed at increasing Indigenous participation in higher and further education. We want to make sure that we get as many young people, not just through school, but going on into further education so that they can get the great jobs that are available. We have ended, as Delia emphasised, we have ended the decades of underinvestment in housing, and we are now finally seeing the building of thousands of houses right across remote Australia, healthier places for families to live in. And the emphasis on jobs. Just in July this year, we started what also is a huge shift, a major change in policy with the introduction of the Remote Jobs and Communities program, making sure that everybody understands how critical it is to get prepared for work and into a job. We also understand that all of these commitments in health, in education, in making sure that people get ready for work, all of them require significant commitments of funding, and that is what has been done by this government. But one area that so many of you have raised with me that is an area where we do need to do more work is in the area of justice. We do know that far too many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are incarcerated. It's also the case that far too many people are the victims of crime. And so we want to work with you as well to develop a new Closing the Gap justice target to reduce these incarceration rates, to reduce the incidence of violence, and to make sure that people can have a safer life. We know how critical it is, given the large numbers of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leaders who've really pushed to get a new justice target, and of course we'll work with these Aboriginal leaders to make sure that it's developed. We've had over the last few months, of course, the start of a massive program of change to make sure that people with disability finally get the care and support they need with the introduction of disability care. But thank you. But the important part for today is that we've had a group of Indigenous people with disabilities really emphasise just how critical it is for them to make sure that they too will get the care and support that they need with the introduction of disability care. And the emphasis on the word need. And we've already had a group develop a new target, and they've made clear that we need to make sure that 90% of Indigenous Australians will get the funding and support that they need through Disability Care Australia by 2020. We know how critical it is to see this Closing the Gap project through by delivering on the targets that we set ourselves more than 5 years ago, and by setting new targets to keep all of us focused on the things that will make a difference. Of course, as we turn our eyes to the future, one of the most exciting prospects that I see for this project to close the gap is the high expectations that Aboriginal people and communities have of themselves, have of yourselves. That's really what I think is the most exciting change that's happening right now. And the message that you're giving me is that you want governments to work with you, that you want to lead and you want our support. And of course, we do have many of these leaders from communities in many, many different parts of the country, not just remote Australia, in regional towns and also in our cities, knocking on the door, telling me about what they want to see changed, telling me that they want work, that they want local business opportunities to develop, whether it's in tourism, local services, building local infrastructure, all of them about creating the jobs that people need and creating the businesses that need to grow. We know that, of course, Aboriginal people want to live in prosperous communities where they're in charge of their own solutions and their own futures. That's why I have been an unwavering supporter of the Cape York welfare reform trials. We have seen the benefits that come from local leadership focusing on the importance of responsibility, which we also heard so clearly this morning. The recent evaluation of the Cape York welfare reform trials show us that improvements in school attendance, care and protection of children, community safety, all of these critical areas are improving. And we're supporting other communities to take up this work, to lead the development of models of change that work in their local communities. In Western Australia, we've got people here from the Woonan Foundation also developing a welfare reform model for the East Kimberley. In places like Wadair, Groot, we're supporting community-led initiatives to strengthen both community and personal responsibility. So I'm very pleased to be able to announce today that we're going to commit, if we're successful at the coming election, commit an additional $5 million to support other interested Indigenous communities across the country to develop community-led approaches to strengthen individual and community social norms. And we're also committing to continuing to work with Indigenous leaders who've been driving change. To those of you here today, the Indigenous leaders here today who've been driving the change that we're all talking about, the commitment I'm giving you today is that we want to work with you. We want to work with you to bring about and progress the future models for reform. These leaders have been talking to me about how important this is to them, and at its essence, it's about keeping culture strong. That's the message that I get from these Indigenous leaders, making sure that these leaders and communities have the resources they need to make sure that they also learn from each other's experience. Of course, we do have to also acknowledge on an occasion like this that not everything is great. There are some very, very difficult issues that we all have to confront. And one of the most difficult is the abuse that comes as a result of people and the violence that comes from alcohol abuse. It is and continues to be one of the biggest barriers to strong communities. And of course, we've been working over the last 5 years with many, many leaders and communities who say to me, alcohol is killing our families. Alcohol is killing our culture. I look around the auditorium today and see the people here who've said that to me. We know that there are far too many vulnerable people, women and children, who still suffer the horrific consequences of alcohol abuse. That's why we've done so much to support communities, especially here in the Northern Territory, to develop their own alcohol management plans, to meet stringent minimum conditions. And elsewhere in the country, we've created a Breaking the Cycle program, once again working with local communities to do all the things that are needed to address alcohol-related harm, and especially to keep women and children and families safe. So Labor will create an additional fund, another $15 million, to support other communities in other parts of Australia that also want to step up and tackle alcohol abuse by developing those plans in their local communities that will see harm reduced. We want to make sure that the protection of local people is right at the heart of what we do. Just last month, I was up here with the Prime Minister to participate in the celebrations of the 50th anniversary of the Yirrkala Bark petitions, to realise, of course, the promise that was so hard fought for, the promise of land rights that so many people celebrated on that day, to make sure that Aboriginal people can use their land for economic development, for work. And Galarrwuy Yunupingu put out a challenge to Kevin Rudd on that day. And I want to say to Galarrwuy and to the others who were with us on that day that we embrace that challenge. We embrace the challenge of making sure that land is available for you to develop in the way that you see fit. It's why we've recently announced changes to the tax treatment of native title to help unlock the economic potential available. And it's also why we're supporting the establishment of an Indigenous Community Development Corporation, and I'd like to thank some of the people here who've done a lot of work to make sure that this is now going to become a reality. This corporation could be used to provide financial support for a wider range of community or economic development opportunities than that which is currently possible through existing structures. It's also why we've recently announced a review of native title organisations to make sure that they work in the most effective way for landholders into the future, right out into the future. Of course, we respect the inalienable basis of traditional lands, but I think everybody here, the Indigenous leaders here, would all say we need to find the ways so that Indigenous owners can make that land available for commercial purposes where they choose to do so. So we want to work with you in meeting your aspirations, and we're ready to meet the challenge that was thrown to us just a few weeks ago. I know there's going to be so many different discussions taking place over the next few days, and one of the things I was just really pleased to announce this morning is that as a result of the decision of the Aboriginal Benefits Account, the Consultative Committee recommended that we provide a $3 million grant to build the Garma Cultural and Knowledge Centre, which is going to be constructed just over here. This centre will, of course, act as a general meeting place for the Yolngu clans, particularly when conducting business, but it's also going to be used for adult training, education, showcase culture, encouraging employment and economic opportunities in the region. So congratulations to all of you who are so instrumental in putting this proposal forward, and I also want to acknowledge the members of the ABA committee who are with us today, who I can see up the back there. Thank you both. Just finally, because I may not get another opportunity today, I really want to move to a couple of other very significant announcements that I've agreed recently with the ABA Consultative Committee that we would announce here at Garma today. I'm really just thrilled that we're finally getting up and running a new company, a new housing company that will build, manage and maintain housing in remote parts of the Northern Territory, particularly for staff, including Indigenous staff, who at the moment don't get access to decent housing. We have a huge shortage of staff housing in remote communities, and as a result of the decision of the ABA committee, I really am so pleased to announce that we are going to put a $90 million grant into a new company. The Indigenous Business Australia is going to help establish this company with other Indigenous corporations in the Territory, and I do want to thank Dawn Casey, who's also here with us today, the chair of IBA, very, very much for your leadership and for your willingness to take on this very important new task. This really will make a huge difference to people who are wanting to work as professionals, might be a teacher, a nurse, a nurse's aide, an Aboriginal health worker. All of these people, of course, want to live in a decent house in communities, and as a result of this decision, will be able to. I also want to announce once again, as a result of a decision of the ABA Consultative Committee, an additional $40 million over the next 4 years for further investment in homelands. And I thank you for your leadership. I very much thank the members of the ABA committee for your leadership on these issues, not just for the decision about the money, but the way in which you've thought about how this should be done, so that we can see support for people living on homelands and investment in making sure that people have the infrastructure that they need to stay there. All of these projects, of course, will help make sure that people living in this part of the Northern Territory, but also other parts of the Northern Territory, get the support they need. And in addition to thanking both the chairs and deputy chairs of the Central Land Council and the Northern Land Council who are here with us today, I'd also like to especially thank Pat Brahm, the chair of the ABA Consultative Committee. It is a time of great anticipation, I think, of all the things that we've got ahead of us, realising what is a real promise for the future. I do thank you very, very much for giving me the opportunity to come here today to make these important announcements that are all about the future, building a better future for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Thank you.
On behalf of your D&D Foundation and Garma, I'd like to acknowledge Minister Macklin and the Leader of the Opposition from the Territory Government, Delia Lawrie, for your speech. And thank you, Minister, for making those announcements and for your ongoing supports on supporting our communities. A special thank you goes to Warren Snowden from me and my family for your ongoing support on the Kartalla boarding facility project. And thank you.